So next we have this conversation around the Office of the Inspector General of Police, and there are those who would think, hey, this was a matter laid to rest as far back as 2021. And here it is happening again. So joining us this morning to have a conversation around this is Monday Ubani, who is a legal practitioner and chairman, section of Public Interest and Development, SPIDL of the NBA. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Mr. Ubani. Is this, in your opinion, something that needs so much attention, or is just one of those things that we're going to let it go after some time? The court's already decided on it. Or is there something else?
Yeah, thank you, Ayo, for having me. Good morning. Ayo, I think that the court in 2021 failed to address the issue as to whether this issue of 4 years tenure that is provided by the Police Act is meant to override Section 18 of the same Police Act that says every serving police officer has a timeline within which to put in the service. 35 years, pensionable years, or 60 years by age. Now, whichever one is earlier. Now, if you have such a provision that is even a later provision, I mean, you talk about Section 7.6 now, you mentioned 4 years. And then there is Section 18 that says every serving police officer, including the IG, who has 35 years to put in service or 60 years by age, is a conflict and requires a clearer interpretation by the court. But unfortunately, Justice Adamu of the Federal High Court, who heard the matter, failed to address that issue, but made different ratios. He was saying, one, the Act itself did not specifically exclude the president from renewing the tenure of the IG. And secondly, that since there is a other relevant body to consider, like the police council, pending the consultation with the police council, that the president has a right to still retain the IG, pending the time the substantive IG will be appointed. That was the ratio that the court adopted and did not address this issue of the tenure. If you have maybe 1 year or 2 years for you to retire and you are appointed an IG, can that particular Section 7.6 now extend your tenure, your service year, from the normal year agreed upon by the service rules and the Act itself to another, 4 years? Is it the meaning of that particular section? Was that the intention of the lawmakers? So that opportunity was missed, and I think that the matter is presently before the Court of Appeal, and I feel that that issue will be well addressed. And so based upon that section, you can see that the president has also lashed in on it and said, oh, the IG has 4 years tenure going by the Act, and then has gone ahead now to extend his tenure. I don't know how many years now, either by 2 years or months. So they were not specific as to the tenure that he's going to enjoy as way of extension.
Or is in conflict with itself, going by the provisions of Section 18 and Section 47 of the Electoral Act, Section 7 of the Police Act, beg your pardon, which is clear, subsections 4, 5, and 6 of Section 7 of the Police Act, which made, those allusions that you talked about. Would you then say that that section is in conflict with Section 18 that you quoted?
My view is that there is no conflict whatsoever. What Section 7.6 did was to specifically mention the tenure of the IG. At every point in time, if you are a public officer, to be appointed that requires confirmation, the Act always make a provision as to your tenure. Are you going to be there for 2 years or for 4 years? That is actually what 7.6 did, by saying every serving IG has the tenure of 4 years. Now, it does not in any way make it right for somebody whose tenure will soon, whose service will soon elapse, to now be extended by the provisions of that Act. No, that couldn't have been the intention of the drafters of that law. What it says is that you have a tenure, quite all right. That tenure is certain, as long as you have followed the normal process in order to appoint that IG, and who has been confirmed properly. Now, having done that, if you have years to stay in the ministry or in the service, and your time has expired, there is no way you can use that particular section to elongate that person's tenure, because that actually will defeat all logic. There are those who are there, who are also aspiring to be an IG, and they enter into the service just like you did. So why would you now want to stay where others want to be after you have exhausted all your service years and all that? And you are now you are blocking them by that appointment. And you are also destroying the issue of patriotism, and you are dampening morale. If I enter into a service, I have aspiration to arrive to the highest level in that particular profession. But all of a sudden, somebody is being used now to block my position. And I may probably even retire, and the man is still in service, even though probably he entered before me. So it is not a very correct logic, for us to interpret that act. And the court felt, in its duty to really, examine that possible conflict and give a clearer picture, so that the subsequent action of the government will be in tandem with the law. The intention of the law is to ensure that you have a tenure. But if your time of service has expired, then there is no way that particular section will extend your tenure. And it's clearly something that is logical. As I said earlier, there is no reason for this. And let me also remind you that the Act says at any point in time, the IG is no longer there. The most senior police officer, we step in. In other words, there is no vacuum, because that was the reason the judge gave, that there mustn't be a vacuum at any point in time. But the Act itself has even created a situation where there won't be any vacuum, because the most senior will take over the position of the IG, acting pending the time there will be a substantive IG. So it's a correct way of doing things. Our way of doing things in this country, I keep on emphasizing, we always follow the wrong way of doing things. That's why the president can stay for almost 4 years without handing over to his vice. For all the years, for all the months he traveled outside the country, they were waiting for 21 days before the law itself can be applicable, whereas that was not the intention of the Act, of the Constitution.
Mr. Ubani, which is the overriding argument here? The need for the country to have a police IG who is the current captain to steer the ship at this all-important stage of the elections, or the need for the law to take precedence now, especially because he's turning 60 right amid the elections. So for you, which is the overriding argument?
The overriding argument should be the issue of national interest. National interest at every point in time is that we must build strong institutions and not strong individuals. The moment your life revolves around an individual in any institution, it is a wrong procedure, and it's something that we should not begin to create as a precedent. Rather, institutions should be very strong, that one IG will be in a position to act in accordance with his tenure, in accordance with his term of years of service. Then another person who is also aspiring to be one will come into the particular position that is the law itself has allowed him to come in, and then perform his duty that is already laid down. There is no question of using somebody now, oh, he's indispensable. Because that argument is that, oh, this IG now is indispensable, he has to stay and then stay at the election of 2023. What makes him a specialist on election matter? What makes him a specialist more than other police officers and other? In other words, there are no serious-minded police officers who are also intelligent enough to probably guide the electoral process as a police officer. So that is the argument. So I think that the national interest should prevail at every point in time, not sectional interest, not personal interest. Because what has happened now is that the president now feels that this man is the most competent individual. Who tells him that? What is the criteria that he has used now to say that this man can only be the one to steer the electoral process, peacefully, other than other police officers who are also entitled to be an IG?
So what exactly is at play here? Because, of course, the federal government is aware of the law, what the law says, the requirements of the law. So what exactly is the interest that is playing out here?
Well, you are asking me to guess. I don't know what I will say at this juncture. The only thing I'm going to do is to guess. The president himself has always done it this way. At any point in time, there is any opportunity for somebody other than the person they prefer at any point in time to come into a position. The president will always breach the rules and the laws in order to ensure that he has his way. His whim and caprices always prevail. It has happened with the appointment of DSS officers. It has happened with even the military. He has always allowed his own personal ego and his personal choice to supersede that of national interest. And as I said earlier, if the law is very clear as to what should happen, why would he disobey the law? The particular police act they are quoting now that says 4 years says also that a police officer has 35 years or 60 years and that is Section 18. If he says that, and says that a most senior officer at any point in time should also step in if there is no, IG. It's there in the Act itself. So the Act itself is comprehensive as to what should happen at every point in time. But the president, as usual, will rather, observe the law in breach.
You have said that what should prevail is national interest, and you've gone ahead to define what national interest is for you, which you say is building strong institutions. But you and I know that our institutions are not where we want them to be, that largely they still revolve around whoever the head of an organization is. So when you talk about national interest, is that something futuristic, which you're speaking of, or something which you think already exists and there'll be no vacuum left or felt, assuming the IG were to, stricter sensu, follow the rules?
Again, that is an intelligent question. You see, issue of building institution must start, someday. And I think that this government that came with a mantra of obeying the rules of law and doing things rightly, because that was a promise they made in 2015, that things were being done wrongly by the previous government, that when they come in, they will begin to do things properly. One would have expected that with this government, certain things of the past, certain behaviors, that we consider very bad, would have stopped. But we have been taken back several years by this particular government in terms of misgovernance, in terms of bad behavior, even observance of rule of law. So I think that we must begin to insist that things be done properly. That has always been my position. That why this nation is retarded and why this nation is not making progress and why people do not take Nigeria serious is that our leaders do not know how to do the right thing. Even when the law is explicit, even when things are clear, when it's even logical for them to do, they always prefer to do the wrong thing. So I say that I'm of the opinion that we must start doing the right things now. I must not, there must be a day we must say, oh, this government has started to lay a very good precedent. It must start with a government that comes with a lot of goodwill and a lot of promise. So I feel that this government should have been the one to start. That's why I'm not hoping for it to be futuristic. I'm saying that it must be something we must begin to do now. If the law is explicit, if the law is very clear, and you are the one that signed the law, you have no right to observe your own law you sign in breach. That is my position.
Yeah, Mr. Ubani, I mean, the very fact that the president signed the law or maybe already shows that he has good intentions to follow it. But you understand very much that these are extraordinary times. Our elections are war. That's how politicians see it. And that if a process is put in place to ensure that things are done properly with regards to security during an election, is it right? So some people say that this is now between common sense and the law, that after the presidential elections are conducted, before the governorship elections commence, that we remove the IG.
What I'm saying is that if we have put structures in place, if proper conditions have been laid, there is no reason why an IG that has retired, should continue to be in office while we have other, IGs that operate private market. And there is nothing that says that he can handle it better than the person that is next to him. There is no criteria we're using now to judge this president IG that, oh, he will be the person to handle this electoral process, security-wise better than anyone that will take over from him. That would be the argument, that he is better off. What is the criteria? What makes you even think that the person that will come in after him will not even do better than what he's doing presently or what he will want to do, in the electoral process? So my take is, look, I just want things to be done, properly as a nation. That has always been my position in this nation. That, look, let's begin to do right things and, set clear precedent that everyone comes and say, oh, thumbs up for the man who has done this. That is the only way we can build this nation. But the moment we begin to cut corners and begin to rationalize it, and it retires us. It makes the country to be retarded. And it makes other nations to look at us as a nation that is unserious. Because countries, respect nations that follow their rules. The president signs it. I mean, he was the one that signed the law. So why would the president now be the one to breach the law that he himself signed? He looked at the provisions of the law and they're all, clearly right. And Bible said that God created the heaven and earth and he saw that everything was beautiful. And he says, go and occupy. So if the president signed the law, why would the president be the one to breach that law that he signed that has a explicit provision as to what should happen at every point in time with regard to the IG that he has just now renewed his tenure? So I think that we must begin to insist. As I tell you, there is no criterion that says that this man will handle this process better than anyone that will take over from him. That is my position.
Let me clarify what it is that you're saying. By the pronouncements we heard yesterday, is it that the tenure of the IG has been renewed, or is just extended, perhaps just to cover the elections?
I think the man was making a reference to Section 7.6, which talked about 4 years. And if you're going by what has happened with the present IG, I think he has stayed up to 2 years. So they may have extended it because he was not explicit as to how many months or years they've given him. They may have extended his tenure to 2 years. To 2 years, meaning that he has 4 years within which to occupy that position. And I said that the court missed that opportunity to give a clearer interpretation of that section. Does it mean that if my years of service has expired and I'm appointed, maybe a month before my service year will expire, that means that section has now extended my service year by additional 3 years or 4 years? That is what the court should interpret. Or does it mean that when my time comes, my service year, then I should go, let another person take over? So that particular opportunity was missed by the lower court, but I think that the Court of Appeal will be able to correct, that particular interpretation and give us a clearer picture. Because the law is, you have years to stay in the civil service, 35 years or 60 years in age, whichever one is earlier. So why would somebody now use an act now to extend somebody's tenure? Unless you are saying there is no competent person to take over. Of course, private companies do it. When somebody is an expert and is retiring, they can bring that person on contract. It is allowed. But in this case, don't we have men? There are so many DIGs, there are so many AIGs. So why are you now saying that this man only can be the only one to guard the electoral process, security-wise? What criteria did you use? And then why are you now demoralizing those who are behind? It's not fair. It's not fair for those also who joined the service in order to attain the highest position in their career. And you are now using this man now to block their way. It is not right. Let's not encourage that. It's not a good behavior.
Well, while we hope that will be sorted out as to whether, security of tenure, because that's another thing that we know that the Police Act was trying to protect. Whilst we hope that, that will be sorted out as to know whether security of tenure takes precedence over retirement age or, retirement age, do you think that debate should be had during this electoral period? Don't you think the election should be over before we begin to go and start testing the law or, finding out what should happen?
You are still saying the same thing, that we must allow this man to continue to be in that. But you see, the conversation has started. And I think there are some people also who feel that this is not the right thing for the president to have done in this circumstance. And it's good we raise this consciousness, so that we begin to do. I'm a public interest lawyer. And I'm interested in things being done properly. And that's why I go to court most often when I see that the laws are being violated by those who are supposed to observe the law. You're asking us to wait until after the election before we can test this law. But I think that we must begin to insist that right things be done. Some people are already going to court over this matter. The Court of Appeal decision, I hope they will hasten it in order to actually give a proper interpretation of the issue of security of tenure and the issue of retirement of service. Whether you can use that security of tenure now to extend the years of service of a public servant. That, again, is what the court should clarify. But I think that it will not be right for those who are aspiring to that position to be blocked by a man who entered with the same view, with the same ambition. Because somebody's ambition now is being killed because of one individual. And so many of them who are queuing up in order to be an IG, who may retire now if you extend this man's tenure. And this man will still be in service. Is it fair? For one individual, many others suffer. So I think that it's an argument that is a conversation that is ongoing. Let's begin to debate these issues and insist on right things being done for us as a nation, because that is the only way people begin to respect us as a civilized nation.
Okay, let me take you up on, because some people will also argue on precedent, because if this matter goes to court, there will be some people have argued in the past that positions like that of the IGP, DG Customs, CG Immigrations, even army chiefs, for instance, the military chiefs. We heard this argument during the tenure of the military chiefs, some military chiefs whose time for retirement had already come, but were still in that position. There's been question as to whether or not, these are political positions and are done at the pleasure of the president. So, for instance, the CG of Nigerian Customs is not even somebody from among the Nigerian Customs. So I'm just wondering, has there been any debate or any decision with regards to the powers of the president on appointing whosoever he pleases, whether or not those powers are strictly political powers given to the chief executive?
I love this question also. I think if the positions you've mentioned are not governed by law, we can now give the president the latitude, to do whatever he wants to do with regards to either renewal or extension or appointment. But most of these positions you mentioned are governed by law. And as long as they are governed by law, for us as public interest lawyers, we will insist fair and due compliance with the provisions of the law. That is the only way people begin to regard you as running a democratic government, because you have a law, and the law makes provision as to what should happen at every point in time. It's not as if there is any lacuna. Even if there is any lacuna, the court has a right, to make interpretation to, cover the lacuna. But in this case, as I said earlier, the Police Act 2020, very explicit as to tenure of whoever is coming in as an IG. Very explicit as to years of service. Whoever has attained those years, he must leave. Very, very explicit as to vacuum. If there is any vacuum at every point in time, there is somebody that should step in. So if the law itself has made such explicit provision, will it be now right for us to leave things like this to the whims and caprices of the president? That, again, is something that cannot be tolerated in a democratic setup, unless we are running a military regime whereby he can do whatever he wants to do. But when you have laws, rules, and regulations, you must insist that those rules and regulations must be complied at every point in time, unless there is an emergency, unless there is an exigency that requires you to now depart and begin to do certain things, which will be logical and, and
Ubani,
to everyone.
My apologies for butting in. Section 7 is very clear that the Inspector General of Police shall be a senior officer, shall be a senior police officer, not the highest. A senior police officer, not below the rank of so. But
IG,
section...
AIG and
yes, but the appointment shall be by the president on the advice of the police council from among 7 members of the police force. Now, if you go to this particular, this other section 18 that you quoted earlier, which speaks about how the person can be removed and all, section 8, which you quoted earlier, said that every police officer shall be on recruitment or appointment serve in the police force for a period of 35 years or until he attains the age of 60 years. None of this information is lost on the police council. None of this information is lost on the Police Service Commission, for instance. Is there something missing within the gap between the time the president receives the recommendation and the time the pronouncement is made? Because some people have to recommend to him. So I expect that some of all this information would have been factored in. The length of years the person will be by the time he should retire, the number of years the person has to live, before the person is 60. So, talking about the process of that appointment, do you see a fault there, something that needs adjusting? Or maybe perhaps if we addressed it from that way, all the facts were on the table, maybe the appointment could have been readjusted?
Every government is supposed to be very smart. You must run a smart government. We're in 2023. Now, what does it mean? You appoint an IG, you have his record, that this IG was enlisted into the service this year, and you have an idea of when he's going to retire. And you know there's going to be a process, for a replacement at every point in time. You know when that replacement should take place, or even when the process should start. As I said earlier, you have to be a smart government. Now, if you have the idea of when this man is enlisted and know when he's going to leave, and know when you must start the process for replacement in case he's on his way out, you are supposed to follow all that process. Let's maybe make an exception to Adamu's case, where we heard that the president just got to know that the man will retire, he's going to leave office in 2 days. And that was sometime in 2021. So he had to now to renew his tenure for 3 months. But in the case of Babana, you are talking about January. We're in January. This man will retire in March, 1st of March. That is when he will attain 60 years. Now, why wouldn't you start the process of getting a replacement in consultation with the police council earlier on? I mean, when in January, you can complete that process between now and February. So why must you now begin to extend his tenure in January? for a man that his tenure is expiring in March, showing that you have no intention of even having a replacement in the first place, and you don't even want to initiate the process. So you're not running a smart government. So that is my conclusion. So I'm saying that there's nothing missing in the act, Ayo. There is nothing, except that most time we use the law in a wrong manner, and that is why we run into a problem. If we are smart, we must know when the man enters, we know when he's going to leave, we must know when to start the process of replacement, and start on time, and then have it done properly, so that everyone will say, this is right, that this government has gotten their acts together.
Mr.
Most
Ubani,
times, we do the wrong things always, and that is my problem with this nation. Yes, go ahead.
Mr. Ubani, in now trying to do the right thing, you know, and I relate this to the argument on the excessive powers of the president, vis-a-vis the need to build strong institutions. If there was to be some form of constitutional amendment that should be considered in this case, where you're considering an alternative to the appointment of the Police Inspector General of Police, perhaps if it were to now be placed in the powers of the Police Council, can you trust that institution, you know, to now take up the responsibility of appointing the Police Inspector General of Police, particularly if we went by how that institution has handled issues like as simple as recruitment in the past?
To be sincere with you, and I'm very sorry to say it on national television, I don't trust any institution in Nigeria. And the reason is not far-fetched. We don't have strong institutions. And as long as we don't have strong institutions, it is not in my position to say, oh, I will trust this if we now change the system from the presidency now to the council now being the one to recruit. I don't trust any institution in Nigeria because of things like this. No institution is allowed in Nigeria to operate, you know, fully, independently, and in charge of their institution. We don't build strong institutions. We build strength around individuals, and that shouldn't be. So,
what would you recommend
answer your question directly, I don't trust any institution to do any right thing in this country because we have not cultivated the culture of compliance with our rules, because they will find a way of circumventing even when there is express provision. We have seen what the president has done with even when there is express provision in a law that he signed. He's circumventing it. So what stopped the council from also doing it? So we don't have an institution that is actually working to perfect, you know, impetus. They are working to the level that most of us who observe other nations do things rightly, you know, is working. We don't have any institution like that.
So what would you recommend, Mr. Ubani?
My recommendation is that we must obey the law. No matter how imperfect that law is, no matter how we think that the proper thing is this, contrary to the law, we must obey our law. If you begin to obey our laws, and the courts are up to, in terms of making sure that anything that is wrong, the court will be very bold enough to say, no, we are not going to go this way. I can assure you that most things in this country will be done right. People will not enter somebody's land by force, knowing fully well that the court will say, no, I will not accept it. Government will not begin to disobey laws because they know that there is court. There is a court that will say, no, I am not going to look at your face, or that you are the one who appointed me. I will tell you that this thing is wrong and it's wrong, and I will go ahead and commit you for contempt. You know, if we begin to have institutions like court working that way, and people insisting on things being done properly, I can assure you we have a nation that you and I will be very proud of. But for now, our leaders get away with free murder because we accept it, we tolerate them, and the courts are not there for us in order to bring them to a position of obedience. The court must make people to obey the law. That's the only way to work. The courts have onerous duty in this country to get our nations to work. I have said it 50%, let me not say 80. I said 80 the other time. Maybe 50% of our problem will be solved if our judiciary begin to hold people accountable in this country. That's my position, and I maintain it, and I insist on it.
Whether or not we're indicting the judiciary, I don't even want to get into that conversation this morning. But we have to thank you very much. Monday Ubani is Chairman, Section of Public Interest and Development at of SPIDO at the NBA. Thank you again for being a part of our conversation this morning.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Yeah.